Yeah, we're doing it. George R. R. Martin's big, controversial, scandalous, not a blog post. This was an issue that I can chime in on somewhat intelligently and maybe quench the fires here a little bit. So, George R. R. Martin, if you're not aware, made a blog post and then removed it like 30 minutes later. Basically criticizing House of the Dragon, HBO's TV show, spin-off from Game of Thrones. It's about House Targaryen, and, well, if you're watching this, you know what House of the Dragon is. He talks about the butterfly effect, where when you change one thing that you think is unimportant, it causes more changes down the line that you have to make that you didn't foresee. Change begets change. That's what he says. And that's the point, really. So let's read some of what George R. R. Martin said. Back in July, I promised you some further thoughts about Blood and Cheese and Maelor the Missing, after my commentary on the first two episodes of House of the Dragon Season 2, Son for a Son and Rhaenyra the Cruel. Those were terrific episodes, well written, well directed, powerfully acted. Da-da-da-da-da. I found myself agreeing with both sides. So there's a mixed reaction. In my book, Aegon and Helaena have 3 children, not 2. The twins, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, are 6 years old. They have a younger brother, Maelor, who is 2. When Blood and Cheese break in on Helaena and the kids, they tell her they are debt collectors come to exact revenge for the death of Prince Lucerys, a son for a son. Or maybe it's Lucerys, I don't know. As Helaena has 2 sons, however, they demand that she choose which one should die. She resists and offers her own life instead, but the killers insist it has to be a son. If she does not name one, they will kill all 3 of the children. To save the life of the twins, Helaena names Maelor. But Blood kills the other boy, Jaehaerys, instead, while Cheese tells little Maelor that his mother wanted him dead. Whether the boy is old enough to understand that is not at all certain. That's not how it happens on the show. There is no Maelor in House of the Dragon. Only the twins, both of whom look younger than 6, but I am no sure judge of children's ages, so I can't be sure how old they are supposed to be. Blood can't seem to tell the twins apart, so Helaena is asked to reveal which one is the boy. You would think a glance up his PJs would reveal that, without involving the mother. Instead of offering her own life to save the kids, Helaena offers them a necklace. Blood and Cheese are not tempted. Blood saws Prince Jaehaerys' head off. We are spared the sight of that. The sound effect suffices. In the book, he lops the head off with a sword. It is a bloody, brutal scene, no doubt. How not? An innocent child is being butchered in front of his mother. I still believe the scene in the book is stronger. The readers have the right of that. The 2 killers are crueler in the book. I thought the actors who played the killers on the show were excellent, but the characters are crueler, harder, and more frightening in Fire and Blood. In the show, Blood is a gold cloak. In the book, he is a former gold cloak, stripped of his office for beating a woman to death. Book Blood is the sort of man who might think making a woman choose which of her sons should die is amusing, especially when they double down on the wanton cruelty by murdering the boy she tries to save. Da-da-da-da-da. So, full disclosure, I have not watched House of the Dragon Season 2. Not even a little bit. And I probably won't until I get around to rereading or, reading Fire and Blood. Because I've never actually read it all the way through. But I have read big chunks of it. It's not the most enjoyable read to me. But it's not unenjoyable. It's just... I like the narrative flow of the main series better than the fake histories. And anyway, yeah, apparently the show did things differently than the books. George doesn't like it. A lot of the fans, a lot of the watchers don't like it. And most of the readers probably don't like it because they tend not to like that sort of thing. I stopped watching House of the Dragon because it was just terrible. Like, the extent of the changes from the books that they're doing shows me that they're not actually interested in telling George R. R. Martin's story. They're interested in telling their own story. And their own story is basically just their politics. It's progressivism, basically. The woman should be the ruler. And anybody who disagrees with that for any reason, even in the story, is just hates women. It's so stupid. And but that's what they're doing. That's the direction the show took, and they're very open about it. Like, he literally says they literally say that they wrote Alicent by thinking of her as a Trump supporter, like a female Trump supporter. It's like, okay, so just like a category of people you hate. That's what it is. That's how you wrote her. I get it now. Like, she's subhuman. And it's funny that they did that, because Fire and Blood, the book, is a history book. It tells the histories of the Song of Ice and Fire world, the in-story world. But it's also an in-story history book. It was written from, it exists in the story, and it was written by a character in the story, whose name we know. His name is Archmaester Gildane. And it being written by someone in the story means that before you explain what's in the story by saying why George R. R. Martin wrote it, you first have to explain what's in the story by saying why Maester Gildane wrote it. And so, one of the recurring mistakes I see in the audience is that they just skip Gildane. They go straight to George R. R. Martin. They say things like, well, George R. R. Martin is a liberal, always has been, and so my interpretation of this part of the story is in alignment with progressivism and liberalism and leftism, da-da-da-da-da. Therefore, it must be right. And of course, the unwritten part of that is an author can't and never would write anything, fictional or otherwise, that would contradict his own preferences. So anyway, the way I even became aware of this little controversy or whatever, scandal, that's a bit of a stretch to me, was I came across people criticizing Preston Jacobs' take on it. So let's look at that real quick. Scandal. George R. R. Martin deletes blog post. Him and Carmine, aka Red Team Review, are just chatting for like an hour or whatever, trying to make sense of this. And see, this one's funny. I agree with that one. Preston saying George is nitpicking insignificant things is peak irony. Yeah, Preston does do that a lot, doesn't he? But well, we'll get to that in a minute. For God's sake, stop pretending you know George's own books better than him. That's embarrassing. Yeah, so one of the key issues here is about whether Maelor, 2-year-old baby Maelor, was the reason Helena killed herself. That was her baby. In Preston's video, he says that it wouldn't make sense if that was the reason why she killed herself, because so much time passed between her learning that Maelor died and her killing herself. And it's actually a really good point. There very well might be more going on in this situation, because since Fire and Blood is a history book and an in-story history book, everything in it has to be questioned. That's why as you're reading the in-story history books like Fire and Blood or The World of Ice and Fire, you're constantly coming across these situations that have like between 2 and 6 possibilities given for what really happened. And as the reader, it can get annoying really quick. Like, hey, I don't want to know what might have happened. I want to know what did happen. So it comes across like reading this, like, you're just reading gossip. Because that's kind of what it amounts to when they tell you like 3 possibilities for what might have happened. And you're left to just fucking sift through the debris, make up your own mind, and never really know for sure what's right. Now, there are ways in the story to know for sure what's right, but they're difficult because these history books are written as history puzzles. You can't take what's in them at face value. You've got to synthesize them with the perspectives of a lot of different characters in the politics of their world. So one character you've got to synthesize the interpretation with is the in-story author, Maester Gildane, Archmaester Gildane. Another one is just the characters in the situation. That's Rhaenyra, Helaena, Maelor even, he's a baby. And the reason I wanted to comment on this whole situation is that, to me, it looks like both sides are partly right. And that actually Preston's right in a more profound sort of way. And then his critics are right in a superficial way. Like, their point is that George R. R. Martin knows his story better than you do. You're an egomaniac who's out of control, trying to finish The Winds of Winter for him, like you're George R. R. Martin or something. You're delusional, da-da-da-da-da. And hey, I'm no fan of Preston Jacobs' cynical exercise in writing The Winds of Winter. But, yeah, he's got the right of it here, I think, for the most part. Because the way he's treating the story is actually the right way to treat it. You are supposed to question what's in it and search it for contradictions and try to solve those contradictions to find out what really happened when these fictional events, fictionally played out in real time. And yeah, a lot of the commenters are like, they don't seem to know that's how you're supposed to handle the story. Like, they're just saying, I love Preston, but he got just about everything wrong in this video, in my opinion. In Fire and Blood, on the literal page where Helaena dies, Septon Eustace says her suicide happens as a result of Mysaria telling her of Maelor's death. And that's true. Fire and Blood does directly say that. Not in those specific words, but close enough. But it also offers some alternatives, and those alternatives, for the most part, cannot be true at the same time as this is true. So that's a contradiction, and it's just left to the readers to figure it out, right? Like, there's nobody coming in saying, well, here's what happened, and also this is a mystery that the reader is supposed to grapple with. You've got to infer that this is a mystery that you're supposed to grapple with by noticing the contradiction. Like, hey, here's 2 things that are being claimed as true, and they can't both be true at the same time. And so another possibility provided in the story is that actually Rhaenyra had Helaena murdered, and that seems like the more credible of the possibilities to me. Just because the other possibility works as a great cover for the murder. So it explains both possibilities. It's like, well, okay, if I'm Rhaenyra and I'm going to murder Helaena, a great way to cover it up is to say that she killed herself out of grief for her recently dead baby, recently killed baby Maelor. Throwing her from a tower would also be a great way to kill her, so that I can cover it up. Say that she killed herself. I think she supposedly jumped from a tower, something like that. I don't remember. But yeah, I don't actually know how this mystery resolves. I have not grappled with it yet. This is actually my first encounter with it. And I haven't even read it once because I haven't read Fire and Blood all the way through once. I've just read like big chunks of it, mostly like in the beginning and the middle. It's kind of sad to see Preston continuously spiral into his delusion that he's the actual author of A Song of Ice and Fire. Yes, granted, he's pretentious and arrogant and all of that. But isn't that part of his charm? Isn't that what we like about him somewhat? Let's be honest here. Condescendingly presume that you know the story and authorial intent better than the author himself. See, that's the other thing. They're not just taking the story at face value, they're taking George R. R. Martin's blog post at face value. Where, let me show you. George makes this long blog post about, the thesis of it is something like change begets change. It's the butterfly effect. And he goes into a lot of details of the changes he didn't like in the show. And one of those is the Maylor situation. And so, at face value, you could take it as he just doesn't like the Maylor situation, the way they did it in the show. But in the context of his thesis, change begets change, butterfly effect, you change a small thing here, you affect the rest of the story later on in big ways that you didn't expect or foresee. In the context of that idea, his complaint about the change, this particular change with Maylor, cutting Maylor, might not actually be a complaint about cutting Maylor. It might be a complaint about the change to the bigger picture that happens when you remove this cog in the puzzle. Because Maylor is a character, and he's a baby, but he's also like a cog in a mystery. He has a functional role in allowing the reader to solve the mystery of what's really going on here in this political situation in the Dance of the Dragons with Maylor, Helena, and Rhaenyra, and so on. And so when you just totally remove one of those cogs, you might make the mystery like unsolvable and make the story behind the story inaccessible, just completely. And that might be actually what his complaint is. But the possibility for that subtext, or any subtext in George R. R. Martin's words, is just getting ignored. Because, well, I think because Preston Jacobs has a pretty big audience, but he also has a pretty big audience of critics. And he's just wrong about something, and so that's always a good opportunity to jump on the dog pile. Let's get him. We've wanted to criticize him for so long. Oh my gosh. It's kind of his own fault, though. Like, he fosters that type of community. That, like, anti-fan community. Like, we're here to criticize a thing, not to celebrate it. I mean, he did it with the show for years. He does it with the books often. The whole, like, we're going to write The Wind's a Winner, TWOW. It's just an exercise in that, basically. Like, look, we're going to do it, George, if you're not going to do it. Most of you know the butterfly effect, I assume. Yeah. Maylor is a 2-year-old toddler in Fire and Blood. But like our butterfly, he has an impact on the story all out of proportion to his size. See? That goes directly to my point that maybe George's point with bringing up this Maylor change has less to do with his apparent impact on the story and more to do with his his unapparent impact on the story. The readers among you may recall that when it appears that Rhaenyra and her blacks are about to capture King's Landing, Queen Alicent becomes concerned for the safety of Helena's remaining children, and takes steps to save them by smuggling them out of the city. The task is given to 2 knights of the Kingsguard. Sir Willis Fell is commanded to deliver Princess Jaehaera to the Baratheons at Storm's End, while Maelor is given over to Sir Rickard Thorne to be escorted across the Mander, to the protection of the Hightower army on its way to King's Landing. Willis Fell delivers Jaehaera safely to the Baratheons at Storm's End, but Sir Rickard fares less well. He and Maelor get as far as Bitterbridge, where he is revealed as a Kingsguard in a tavern called the Hog's Head. Once discovered, Prince Rickard fights bravely to protect his young charge and bring him to safety, but he does not even make it across the bridge before some crossbows bring him down. Prince Maelor is torn from his arms, and then, sadly, ripped to pieces by the mob fighting over the boy and the huge reward that Rhaenyra has offered for his capture and return. Will any of that appear on the show? Maybe, but I don't see how. The butterflies would seem to prohibit it. So in this elaborate side story of what happened with Maelor, I just see a bunch of branches of possibilities for investigating the situation to find out what really happened. George R. R. Martin relies upon his audience to overlook certain things consistently about his story, particularly in the history puzzles, like this one, where one of the things the audience consistently overlooks is the politics, like how important the politics are in the story. We tend to interpret it using our politics, but that gets us into trouble a lot of the time. You can't do that. Like in our world, the politics are a lot about money, but in their world, it's a lot about marriage. Like the reason that bastards in the A Song of Ice and Fire world don't get to inherit anything is not because there's a stigma against bastards. It's the other way around. There's a stigma against bastards because they don't get to inherit anything. Meaning that when you raise a kid who doesn't get to inherit anything, among kids who do get to inherit things, that fosters jealousy and resentment between the kids that is not unlikely to result in like violence and betrayal on the part of the kid who doesn't get to inherit anything. So murder, betrayal, violence, stealing, and all that treachery does actually correlate with being a bastard. It just has sociological roots, not genetic, deterministic ones. People in Westerosi society just generally don't know that because it's indistinguishable from their point of view. It's like, well, I don't know why the bastards tend to murder their trueborn brothers or whatever. But they do. That is the phenomenology of bastards and trueborns. And they notice it. And so to protect against it, they develop this stigma against bastards that causes them to behave wisely with bastards. Mostly that means kicking them out of your castle, not raising them alongside your trueborn children, where they're going to develop all these resentments and have opportunities to kill them and undermine them, or to become favored more than them with other political actors nearby, and so on. Much of solving the history puzzles in the fake history books requires the reader to reintegrate in-story politics in his interpretation, to give greater weight to what the characters in the story believe and how their society functions, regardless of whether you agree with them or not. So when I see this situation where the babies are sent away for their safety, not even by their own mother, it's Alicent who sends them away. And she sends them with 2 Kingsguard which of course they both have Kingsguard in common, but they don't have a family in common. One is from House Fel, and he's the one taking Jaehaerys, I think it was, Jaehaera to the Baratheons at Storm's End. So Fel, Jaehaera, Baratheons, and Storm's End are all specific storytelling choices. And so to understand this mystery, one of the things I would do is weigh all of those decisions against all of the other decisions that the author could have chosen, and then see how that changes the story. And then likewise, Maelor was given to Sir Rickard Thorne of the Kingsguard, so that's House Thorne, and escorted across the Mander to the protection of the Hightower army, so that's House Hightower, on its way to King's Landing. And that part is really conspicuous to me, because, like, if you're going to try to escape New York, you don't walk to Maryland and then take a bus to New York. If you're going to send a knight to escape King's Landing with a baby, maybe you don't send them to an army that's on its way to King's Landing. It might not mean anything, but it might mean everything. So it's just one detail of the mystery that's worth considering. It seems like most of the audience doesn't recognize that this is a mystery and that it's meant to be questioned, because they're so critical of Preston Jacobs for treating it like a mystery and questioning it and simplifying the issue down to, well, the author said this is how it happened, so that's that. You're not allowed to disagree with the author. On the contrary, the author wants you to figure out the story on your own. And the reason a lot of his comments are so dodgy and misleading, when asked about his story and the meanings behind it and the answers to its mysteries, is because he doesn't like when people ask him those things. He wants you guys to figure it out on your own. I think his dodginess and misdirections comes from resentment about his readers trying to circumvent the story to get answers directly from the source, from the author. People just don't want to think, man. But yeah, to me, the Rhaenyra murdered Helena possibility seems the most credible so far, just at face value, just because it explains both possibilities. It explains the possibility that Rhaenyra killed Helena because Rhaenyra killed Helena, and it explains the possibility that Helena killed herself out of grief for Maelor, because that's a great cover story for Rhaenyra if Rhaenyra killed Helena. It's also a great narrative for Rhaenyra's descendants, who, by the way, is everyone between Aegon III and Daenerys Targaryen, our present-day mother of dragons. So in other words, history is written by the victor, and the blacks were the victors of this civil war. And so the histories in the books must be written to favor the blacks, because to write it the other way, to favor the greens, it would have been treason. None of these rulers would have allowed it, because their claims are rooted in the blacks' claims, not the greens. And their interest is in protecting the legitimacy and moral virtue of their claim. Because if the blacks' claim is illegitimate, so is their own. This goes back to what I said about the audience overlooking the politics of their world and not giving them as much weight as the characters do. Thanks for watching. See you next time.